Now, Amnesty International says if government does not urgently intervene in these sporadic attacks against foreign nationals in South Africa, the situation may get worse. Let's bring you more on this discussion now. Bring in Amnesty International spokesperson Genevieve Quintal, who joins us via our video link. It's great to see you, Genevieve. Thanks very much indeed for making time. This, in part, is an indictment on government, isn't it? I mean, there's obviously something to be said about the people who are carrying out these operations, so to speak, but in the same breath, something needs to be said about how they're allowed to do this, with government almost just sitting back, seemingly incapacitated to deal with the problem.
Absolutely. And this was our points that we were making this week. The fact that the lack of action taken by authorities. So the first point would be the police against these groups who are going around demanding that people close their shops or their stores has resulted in impunity and a continuation of violation of human rights. These operations where people are going around saying, well, you're here illegally, forcing you to close your stall or your shop are illegal. What right do they have? It should be the police that are doing that. So when the police know that these operations are happening, because they do get advertised on social media, police should be there to stop these operations. Police shouldn't only come in when clashes result from these. They should be there from the beginning to stop the operations because they are illegal operations.
In a stroke of irony, the Dudula Movement or Operation Dudula, whichever one I guess you recognize, they too would agree that government inaction has led us to where we are, because part of the arguments they're making is that the state has been slow to act on an issue which affects them directly. There's space to entertain that conversation, obviously, but I wonder how we should approach recognizing that legitimate call without legitimizing what has been taking place.
Absolutely. And we should be holding governments accounts for their lack of action on certain things. But it doesn't mean that you have the right to take the law into your own hands and to violate other people's human rights. Our constitution provides that anyone who lives in the borders of South Africa, no matter who you are, where you come from, what your status is, you are entitled to your human rights. You're entitled to your right to safety, security, dignity, and life. So yes, the buck has to stop with the authorities, with government, and we need to put pressure on them to implement the laws properly in this country. But it doesn't mean that because you're frustrated, and we get the frustration that people have, especially in the economic times we are in, but it doesn't mean that you are allowed to take the law into your own hands. And this is why we've said before, leadership, political leadership, government leadership is very important. And we've seen so many comments from political leaders which actually fuel this kind of xenophobic fighting that we're seeing. And people really need to be careful with their words because it's escalating the problem. And we don't want to see what we saw happen in 2008, 2019, etc.
Yeah, who could forget that? The question becomes, though, who is best placed to intervene? Because I'm sure you'll agree, Genevieve, that militarizing, for instance, areas like Alexandra is also not the answer. We found in the past that, ironically, that may very well lead to more violence.
So our problem is that there's actually been no accountability. I mean, if you're doing something illegally, you should be arrested. And so we've previously highlighted how past acts of violence, including the killing of foreign nationals during those xenophobic violence, have gone unpunished. And this leads to this entrenched culture of impunity. So we give the message is it's acceptable to do this. So actually, if you are breaking the law, and that means if you are going and ripping down someone's stall on the side of the road with no authority, you should be arrested. There needs to be consequences. Otherwise, people are going to keep thinking that this is acceptable. And I think that's part of a big part that we haven't had those consequences before when it comes to this kind of violence.
Migration is not entirely a bad thing. In fact, there are many economists who will tell you that there are great economic spin-offs from people moving around in the world. The question then becomes, in a context like ours, how do we turn this around and make it a good thing, possibly? I mean, is it premature, perhaps, to still be having those discussions in a context where many South Africans see themselves as being fundamentally different to their African counterparts, so to speak?
No, look, you're absolutely right. The fact of the matter is that an economy like South Africa's cannot rely solely on local skills to grow and create jobs. And I think you said this, evidence shows that some of the biggest and most industrialized economies around the world have grown because they've absorbed the foreign workforce and skills. And so we need to remember that. But it comes back to that we also can't have our government officials, our political leaders, blaming foreign nationals for the country's unemployment problem because this fans at those xenophobic flames. Then we're never going to get to this point where we are like, okay, we need to work together. We can work with local skills and foreign skills to build our economy. Foreign migrants, asylum seekers, refugees have been used as scapegoats for various problems in the country for way too long. And it's a violation of people's rights.
Yeah. What government has done, and I don't think this is actually new, but it's certainly been highlighted in the past couple of weeks, given what's taken place, is they've revised their critical skills list in order to reserve some sectors specifically just for South Africans. Again, it's actually not new, but I wonder whether you think that's the answer, given the tensions and violence we've seen taking place.
So as Amnesty, we are looking at that policy, looking at how it works. If you are here for whatever reason legally, you should be allowed to work to contribute to the economy. I think all over the world, if you go to a country and you get a visa, etc., you should be able to work. But that is something we're looking into and hopefully can give more context to that at a later stage.
Yeah, sure. You make reference to other countries. Do we have countries that you've been able to observe that are actually doing well when it comes to how they treat issues of migration, foreign nationals in their country, etc., etc.? A big conversation around, for instance, the migrant crisis in Europe in the past couple of years. Do we get countries that stand out, those that are doing a good job?
So again, I can't say that we've done actual analysis on that. We know with the way the world is changing, there's issues around the world about migrants. In a world where economies are not doing so well, we see the war in Ukraine and Russia. But it's definitely something to look into. But we have seen this kind of problem actually worldwide.
Sure. Genevieve Quintal, thanks very much indeed for your time. Really do appreciate it. Genevieve is a spokesperson for Amnesty International.